This is London Real. I am Brayain Rouz. My guest today is Дейвид Айк, the English author, broadcaster, and public speaker. For the past 30 years, you have been known as a professional conspiracy researcher, making it your mission to expose who and what is really controlling the world. You are the author of over 20 books and have lectured in over 25 countries, speaking live for up to 10 hours to tens of thousands of people, delivering incredibly accurate predictions to captivated audiences from all walks of life. Your research into prominent political figures, influential family bloodlines, global events, and the pandemic has received widespread criticism from the mainstream media. But in turn, you have fostered a legion of fans who have grown tired of the government cover-ups, big tech censorship, and the global manipulation efforts that have become an increasing presence in our everyday lives. In 2020, you and I conducted an epic series of 5 record-breaking, long-form live broadcasts which fundamentally changed the world, allowing tens of millions of people access to an alternative narrative that was crucial in understanding the complicated and challenging times that we faced. Your latest book, The Trap, explores the anti-human agenda that is being orchestrated by a force beyond our reasonable perception, a force that has been manipulating and controlling world events in what can best be described as a virtual reality computer game. As I've said before, David, while I don't agree with everything you say, I will defend to the death your right to say it. I'm excited for this conversation today, the 10th in our long history, and as usual, I'll be amazed if we make it through this broadcast without being blocked, banned, censored, and deleted once again. David, welcome back to London Real.
Thank you, Bryan.
It's great to have you here. I want to start by reminding everybody that we are streaming live on our Digital Freedom platform, which is a censorship-free, independent broadcasting system built in 2020 that's of the people, by the people, for the people, and available exclusively on our website at freedomplatform.tv. Can everyone watching now please share this link via the sidebar to any and all of your social media channels, Telegram chats, or email lists? Let me repeat that. Can everyone watching please share this link now via the sidebar to any and all of your channels? This is important. Simply ask your friends and family to give us 15 minutes and then they can decide. During our 5 conversations in 2020, nearly 75% of our viewers came from sharing this episode link peer-to-peer. So please share this now to all of your contacts and your platforms. David, I pledge to you and everyone watching this that none of this conversation will be edited, censored, removed, or banned, and that anyone in the world can watch the full version of this episode free at freedomplatform.tv. Before we start, I want to remind our viewers that here at London Real, we've been fighting for freedom since 2011. We remain one of the few global media companies whose message is not compromised by advertisers, regulators, or big technology platforms. And now, for the first time in our history, you can actually buy shares in London Real during our equity investing campaign for a limited time only. This is an incredible opportunity to become our business partners while simultaneously supporting independent broadcasting and reaping the rewards of our highly profitable business model as we boldly move into the future. Now, David, the time has come. Let us begin. What is The Trap?
Well, I started out 32 years ago, not knowing where it was going. And the first few years were about how the people that appear to be running the world are not. And actually there's another force behind them that's driving the direction of human society. And from about 96 onwards, as I traveled around America, first of all, I started coming into the understanding that behind that network, which we can talk about and how it works, that's behind the direction of human society and has taken us to where we are now, is a non-human force. And then from about, well, just after the turn of the millennium, I got intuitively, so strongly and powerfully, this is a simulation. And the limits of the simulation at this level of it is the speed of light. So the speed of light is not the fastest speed possible. That's a joke. But it's the fastest speed perceivable, if you like, in this level of the simulation. Imagine a virtual reality holographic computer game. in the spring of 2021, an article appeared in Scientific American, a mainstream scientific magazine, written by an academic scientist, saying that he had concluded that we live in a simulation, and the limit of the simulation is the speed of light. And he related the speed of light, quite rightly, I would say, to processing speed. As I've been saying over the years, when you create a computer game, virtual reality game, the creator writes the rules of the game, the limits, what can happen, what can't happen, how things work. Press enter. What would we call that in the case of this being a simulation? We would call that the laws of physics. The laws of physics. The laws of physics are the rules of the game written into the simulation. And this academic scientist in Scientific American, 20-odd years later, made that point and said that although the creator can write the rules, the laws of physics, he's always still going to be limited by the processing speed that's possible, which he related, like I say, quite rightly to the speed of light. So by the time I came around to writing The Trap, I had put together how the world is controlled and directed at this level, the world of the scene. I put together how that level, what I call the global cult, is actually being driven by a non-human force that we can't see for reasons that are very, very simple to explain. And then I'm looking at the fact that this is a simulation. And as I started writing The Trap, a sequence began again, which I have experienced so many times since 1990. A subject will come into my life out of nowhere, like the simulation did. And then suddenly information starts coming to me synchronistically from multiple sources about that subject. And because I've experienced it so often, and what I've gleaned from that process has turned out, with the passage of what we call time, to be so accurate, then I'm obviously aware of here we go again. And what was coming to me while I was writing the book from various sources is that this simulation doesn't end, is not confined to the world of the scene. And I should say that in that period between me saying and writing in the early, just after the turn of the millennium, that this is a simulation and the speed of light is the limit, increasing, and I mean increasing numbers of mainstream scientists have come out and said, it does look like we live in a simulation, because if you take the simulation and all that entails, then it's the only thing really that answers the great mysteries that otherwise can't be answered. So we've had Rich Turrell at NASA in the computer section of NASA saying he believes that this is a holographic digital simulation, which is what I've been saying since the turn of the millennium. And by definition, if it's a simulation, it has to be created by some force because it's not, quote, natural. Then you have James Gates, a former scientific advisor to Barack Obama, who led a team which concluded this does look like we're in a simulation. They found phenomena in the energetic fabric of this reality that was the same as what you find in computerization and computers. Then there's Silas Bean, a physicist who led a team at the University of Bonn into, is this a simulation? And they concluded it almost certainly was, and was probably, in their view, based on a matrix of cubes, a cube-like construct. So when I was writing The Trap, obviously what I'm doing all the time is I'm pushing the cutting edge and I'm pushing the limits, because I've always worked, Brian, on the principle expressed, it's said, by Socrates in ancient Greece: wisdom is knowing how little we know. So if we come to why we can't see this non-human force, you'll kind of grasp, people will grasp why that statement, wisdom is knowing how little we know, is not only so true, but so bloody obvious. Because if I said to people, when you look through your eyes, can you see everything in the space you're looking at? Most people would say, yeah, mate, of course I can. Yeah, of course I can, yeah. Well, you can't. What we can see is the most ridiculously tiny range of frequency. It's almost laughable. According to mainstream science, the electromagnetic spectrum, which is overwhelmingly this reality, is 0.005% of what exists in the universe, in energy in all its different forms. Visible light, which is the only band of frequency that we can see, everything we see now is within that band of frequency, is a fraction of the 0.005%. So humans are blind, basically. And so what we're being asked to believe, going back to Socrates, is that we can glean an understanding of what we need to understand by just looking within that tiny band of frequency, visible light, that we call the human world, the material world of the seen. It's ridiculous. And if you look at religions on that basis, they are saying that all you need to know, and if you don't accept this, you're a blasphemer, is between the covers of a single book within a smear of 0.005% of what exists in the universe. So like I say, wisdom is knowing how little we know. It's not only blatantly true, it's breathtakingly bloody obvious. And that's why I keep pushing the edge, because at any point I know there's always, always, always more to know. So as I was putting the trap together and all this information was coming towards me, I started to think, well, a number of things. First of all, if this is a simulation, and for most of the human population, this simulation is not a nice place. It's a very challenging place. It's a very sinister place. It's a very unpleasant place. You know, there's people in the West that, you know, kind of live a decent life that they're quite happy with, although increasingly fewer as the economy collapses. But you look at most of the world, you look at Africa, South America, Central America, much of Asia, and you're looking at people really, really struggling. They're having really challenging lives. And again, you look around the West and you see how many more and more people are going through the same experience. So the question was, why the bloody hell would anyone come here? Why would consciousness enter this reality? And then there was a bigger question. having experienced it, why would you come back? What? Because I've looked at what we call reincarnation over the years of my 30-odd years, and the evidence for it is actually overwhelming. If you look at the experiences of near-death experiences, and you look at the amazing, massive number of stories of little children describing their previous lives before their head shuts down. And when the facts, detailed facts, are checked out, they are absolutely exactly right. Now, that's happened so many times to so many people all over the world. Obviously, you know, you go, whoa, this stuff's real. So we go back to the question, okay, reincarnation, okay, I accept that that is happening, but why would people keep coming back into this reality when it's a shite hole for enormous numbers of the human population? And then you ask, or you look at why we're told it's happening by the Eastern religions. And the New Age, which is the Eastern religions moved west, in fact. And they'll tell you that what happens is you have to keep reincarnating to learn lessons, to evolve to a level of enlightenment where you can not have to keep on the cycle of reincarnation. So, okay. According to the estimates of mainstream science, compared with the perceived size of the universe, planet Earth is the equivalent of a billionth of a pinhead. Okay. So I'm being asked to believe here that you have to keep reincarnating onto, even in this one universe, never mind all the other realities, you have to keep incarnating onto this billionth of a pinhead to learn the lessons to not have to do it. What? And then, why, if you're learning lessons and building on previous lessons to reach enlightenment, why do you forget the lessons you're supposed to have already learned when you come here and you start with a blank sheet of paper again? It makes no sense. It's frankly ridiculous from my perspective. But I also have become convinced from the evidence I've seen over 32 years that reincarnation is real. So what the hell is going on? Well, how about this simulation is not confined to this level that we call the human world, but there are other levels of it which we call the spirit world. And what if, when people leave the body, if they are not at a state of awareness, what the Eastern religions would call enlightenment, to be vibrating to a frequency which comes from your perceptual state, to get out of the frequency bubble that this simulation is on all its different levels. Well, how about you just go back into the cycle and you keep recycling, not actually onto a billionth of a pinhead, but from one, although it just appears like that, but you're actually reincarnating from other levels of the simulation into this level of the simulation, and it just goes on and on and on. And what if, just as people are bewildered by what the hell this world is and what's happening, that when you leave the body, if you've not reached a certain level of awareness of what the hell's going on, which is what the book's all about, then you're bewildered in another way, and you believe, just as you believe you're here for this reason, that reason, or you're here to learn lessons or whatever you believe, outside of this, still in the simulation, you believe that you have to keep coming back here to learn lessons to get out of the cycle. And it was interesting to me that when you look at ancient cultures and cultural beliefs, they do believe in this cycler movement in and out of this reality. And there's a very old esoteric concept of what they call the ring pass knot. The ring pass knot is perceived to be a limit, symbolize it as the outer rim of a bubble, that if you're not in a certain vibrational state, i.e. state of awareness, which is why they relate enlightenment to getting out of here, then you can't get through the ring pass knot. Other beliefs and religious beliefs talk about the Ouroboros, which is the snake eating its own tail, which is symbolic of this limit, this ring pass knot. And so it becomes clear to me that the trap is much bigger than just the manipulation of this reality that we call the human world. It goes beyond that, well beyond that. So you come into this world to learn lessons, but what happens? You suffer from emotional and mental traumas and challenges. It pulls you into depression, into anxiety, into fear, the four-letter word that controls the world and in fact actually controls the simulation in all its forms. And you leave the body overwhelmingly in a low vibrational state. So you don't get out of here. The idea is that you keep control of perception, i.e. frequency, to the point where no one gets out of here. And you know, there are traps everywhere. Like there's the trap of, yeah, it's about reincarnation and learning lessons. It's a frickin' trap. It's not about learning lessons. We don't have to learn lessons. We are all that is, has been, and ever can be. We don't have to learn lessons to stop incarnating on a billionth of a pinhead or into this level of the simulation, whichever you choose to symbolize it as. We can reach our own state of enlightenment just by the realization of who we are. And if you look at when you come into this reality, the human world, what are they telling you from cradle to grave to self-identify yourself with? The body and the labels of a human life. They're saying you are a man, you are a woman, you are something in between. You are this sexuality, you are that race, you are this religion, you are that income bracket. All these labels, that's who you are. And if you perceive yourself in those incredibly limited terms, because they're not who we are, they are experiences that who we are, consciousness is briefly having in a human life. But if you self-identify with those labels, you're self-identifying with limitation. When you self-identify with limitation, your sense of limitation becomes expressed vibrationally in a low vibrational state, which means when you leave this reality, this human reality, you're in a vibrational state that stays in the cycle, round and round and round it goes. And, you know, the other part of the trap is, where did the simulation come from? And I've been writing about this for quite a while. As Rich Terrell at NASA said, if this is a simulation, which he believes it is, who the hell created it? And this brings us to that question I posed earlier. Why can't we see that which is manipulating us in a non-human form, as I say it is? Well, because we can only see this tiny narrow band of frequency, called visible light. And the force that is manipulating human society, controlling the simulation, actually created the simulation to enslave us by enslaving our perception. It's what the simulation is, enslavement of perception, is operating outside the band of frequency that we can see. And if we call this reality the third dimension, keep it simple, and a higher or another level of frequency high enough for us not to be able to see it, the fourth dimension is what spiritual people call the astral dimension or the astral plane. When people talk about astral traveling, it's actually traveling with the mind, because the fourth dimension, the astral dimension, is the dimension of mind. And it's from there that this reality is manipulated, controlled, and orchestrated from. And if you look at, you talk to people about other dimensions, even if they accept that that's real, they perceive other dimensions to be way out there. Oh my God, they're way out there, these other dimensions. Well, some of them are. Some of them in frequency terms are so far from the frequency band that we're operating in, it's just ridiculous how far away they are. But other dimensions like this astral dimension, the lower level of it, the lower frequency level of it, actually is fusing into this. It bleeds into this reality. And if you look at how they describe the lower levels of the astral plane, the fourth dimension, what they call the lower astral, and you talk to people in different ancient cultures, you talk to people in the spiritual movements of today, they'll say that's the place where the demons are. That's the place where the demonic consciousness is. That's where the darkness is, as they would call it. And I've been looking at this over the years, over the decades. And then you ask, when these people do their satanic rituals, and these major players in this global cult, they're big time into Satanism, been writing about this in detail for a long time. And then you look back and to the ancients who were sacrificing people to the gods. And then you look at the Greek gods, Zeus and all the others. Then you look at the New Age concept of the Great White Brotherhood, which is a hierarchy of basically master souls. And you look at that from a one step back point of view, and you see they're all talking about the same thing. So who are these gods that people worship? Who are these gods they make sacrifices to? They are the demonic consciousness in all its different forms in the lower level of this astral dimension, which in frequency terms is so close to this one, but not close enough for us to see it. And so when they're making sacrifices to the gods, they are, and they're doing their rituals to the gods, they are interacting with this non-human level in the lower astral, which is ultimately orchestrating the simulation and orchestrating human society. So if we go back to the global cult, the global cult can be symbolized, and I'm talking about that operates in the world of the seen, and its impact becoming more and more obvious, not least since the COVID hoax was played. You can symbolize it very accurately as like a spider's web. Think of a spider's web around the planet. And in the center of the spider's web is the spider. Now, ultimately, that spider are these lower fourth dimensional, lower astral, quote, gods, actually, bunch of prats. And the strands in the web immediately around the spider are the most exclusive secret societies. They will have the biggest picture of all the secret societies of what the hell's going on and what's behind it. So they will be directly interacting with these gods.
Without knowing their gods.
Oh no, they know what they're doing.
Know. Okay.
Yeah, but I'll come to that too, because
so a few thousand people know their gods.
Yeah,
maybe less.
Those gods, quote gods in this lower astral, they also impact upon this reality through certain people. You know, the whole process of possession goes back to the ancient world. They've been talking about possession since the ancient world. I've seen possessed people. I've seen them. I've seen what happens to them. They are completely taken over by another consciousness, another state of awareness. And if they're taken over by this demonic consciousness, and I've seen it, then you see a totally transformed person. So a lot of the people that have become now more and more well known for their manipulation of human society, they are actually just vehicles for these lower astral, quote, gods. So you have the spider, you have the web, and each strand in the web is a secret society, a semi-secret group, or a government agency, Silicon Valley, World Health Organization in the world of the seen. So you've got the agenda for humanity being driven by this non-human force. You've got then the web within our reality that its job is to make that agenda happen. So immediately around the spider, you've got the exclusive secret society. It's the most exclusive. Then you're coming out from the spider and you're hitting the secret societies we do know about. The Freemasons, the real inner core, not Bill and Joe down the local lodge. You're looking at the Knights Templar, the Knights of Malta, Opus Dei, the inner core of the Jesuit order. There's the Skull and Bones Society in America. They're legion. And we know they exist, unlike the ones immediately around the spider, but we don't know ultimately what they're doing. You know, if you don't research it anyway, the population doesn't know. And then you come to a point on the web as you come out, which I call the cusp. And this is the point where the hidden part of the web, the secret society part of the web, meets the scene. And at that cusp, you've got organizations like the Bilderberg Group, the Council on Foreign Relations in America, the Trilateral Commission, the Club of Rome that was created in 1968 to specifically exploit the environment and environmental concerns to justify the centralization of global power. This whole global warming stuff has come out of that. And also at this cusp, you have this explosion now of think tanks and non-governmental organizations, many of which are funded by people like Soros. And their job is to take the agenda coming out from the hidden and to play it out in the scene through governments, government agencies, the banking system, corporations, Silicon Valley, the World Health Organization, the big pharma cartel, etc. And if you don't realize that this global cult web exists, then everything seems random. Organizations seem random. They don't seem connected. Situations seem random. They don't seem connected. They're dots. They're not connected dots, which is very simple the more you know to connect them. But the point is that this web means that at the inner core of the World Health Organization, it connects into the web. At the inner core of the Silicon Valley corporations, it connects into the web. At the inner core of the big pharma cartel, it connects into the web. At the inner core of the regulators who's supposed to protect us from big pharma, like the CDC and the FDA in America, and the MHRA in Britain, they connect into the web. So suddenly the world looks different. When the COVID hoax narrative was played out, if you remember, Silicon Valley corporations said almost immediately, your YouTubes and your, well, I know about that, and your Facebooks, we are going to censor people that question the World Health Organization narrative of COVID. Yeah. Now, from a it's all random and not connected and there's no conspiracy point of view, that's bloody bewildering.
Yeah. Well, we were there, and it didn't make sense.
Why would communication organizations that make their money from people posting their views say right at the start, we are going to censor those that challenge the World Health Organization view? Well, World Health Organization was created by the Rockefellers in 1948. It's currently run by its biggest funder, a Rockefeller gopher called Bill Gates, who appointed this corrupt man from Ethiopia, Tedros, the Director General. And so the World Health Organization is a global cult operation. And as I've said in the books over the years and years and years, it was created specifically to control health policy worldwide under one roof and with a handful of people. That's exactly what's happened. And they want to introduce this treaty in which this corrupt Tedros can announce a pandemic on the basis of no evidence. And once he's done that, all the member countries, which is most of the world, have to do what the World Health Organization tells them. So, web organization. Ooh. Look at the background to Facebook and the background to many of these Silicon Valley platforms. And you'll see the CIA through its technological investment arm called InQtel or IQT. And you'll see DARPA, the technological development arm of the Pentagon, both of which are global cult organizations. And so Silicon Valley is controlled by the web in its inner core. So is the World Health Organization. So what you've got is the World Health Organization putting out the cult narrative, and the Silicon Valley corporations defending the cult narrative through the World Health Organization from exposure to protect the narrative, so the narrative goes unchallenged, which without the tenacity of the alternative media, it would have done. And then you look at this fake vaccine, which doesn't meet the criteria of vaccine. They actually changed the criteria to fit when it was pointed out that it doesn't fit the criteria of a vaccine. It's gene therapy. Genetic manipulation through synthetic genetic material. It's not a vaccine. That's why, it's caused mayhem, and enormous numbers of people have died, and growing all the time, because the content of the vaccine is self-replicating, not least through nanotechnology, and so it's impacting on the body more and more in so many people. And even more than have died, and they're enormous numbers now, are even a greater number who've had their health destroyed for life. And you look at the trials that Pfizer and Moderna and all these people that are doing this mRNA synthetic genetic material fake vaccine, they don't exist. And those that were done, as they've been forced to reveal the contents of the trials, pathetic as they were, they did do, it's becoming obvious that they knew what was going to happen because the trials showed them. Pfizer tried to, with help from the government agencies in America, who's supposed to be protecting us from Pfizer, tried to get them shut down for 75 years. That no one would see the contents of the trials for 75 years. Fortunately, a judge overturned that, and what's come out is unbelievable. They knew that women were going to lose their children in pregnancy in great numbers, vast numbers. And you had television doctors in this country, pathetic, going on television, and if a doctor goes on television, he's going to give you the official version, because a doctor that won't will never get on there. We're telling people at the same time, pregnant women, it's perfectly safe and effective. No problems with it. Well, they didn't know that. So why would government agencies like the CDC and the FDA and the MHRA in Britain give permission to Pfizer, Moderna, and these other clowns and psychopaths to use this fake vaccine on people without any proper trials, and when the trials that were done were catastrophic? Why would they do that? Same story. Big Pharma was in effect created by the Rockefellers. J.D. Rockefeller, the oil tycoon. A whole story in detail can be told about that. Big Pharma is a global cult operation. But the global cult also controls the CDC, the FDA, and the MHRA in Britain. And so what's happening is Pfizer and Moderna are going to these agencies, Pfizer and Moderna being expressions of the global cult, to ask other expressions of the global cult, the regulatory agencies, to give them permission to use the fake vaccine, which is the global cult agenda that it's used. And that's why, despite the catastrophic effects on people, covered up by a media that beggars belief in terms of its corruption and stupidity, because they've got kids as well, despite, even by government figures, like the VAERS system in America and the yellow card system in Britain, where doctors and people report the effects of vaccines. And a Harvard study, I think it was in 2010, found that only about 1% of fake vaccine and vaccine reports actually get onto these systems. And even that small number is massive now, right? And yet, these agencies, these regulatory agencies, keep giving permission to these pharmaceutical companies to give not only the fake vaccine they've already created to lower and lower age groups, right down to babies, but they've just given Moderna, in Britain, permission to use another one that's not been tested. Why? Where's the protection? Big Pharma, owned by the cult. Regulatory agencies, owned by the cult. The cult is asking the cult for permission to advance the cult agenda by jabbing the global population. And so the trap is multiple leveled. You've got it, the way it plays out here, and you've got your Gateses and your Klaus Schwabs at the World Economic Forum, and your Faucis and all these people that have pushed this agenda, and they are answering to other levels of the cult in this reality, like Gates is answering to the Rockefellers, but they're also answering to this non-human force. Many of these people will be possessed expressions directly of this non-human force. And then, when you get out of here, you're hitting these other levels of the simulation that are recycling you back in the form of what's called soul. But we talked before.
So how do you escape this trap?
Well, this is the point. Fair enough. I was just going to say that. We talked before about the way to get out of here, the way to get beyond this trap at this level.
Right. Detaching from the senses.
But the answer, getting out the whole thing, is exactly the same. It's the same answer. See, every time we think, every time we feel emotion, we are generating a frequency. We are vibrating on the frequency related to our perception and our mental and emotional state all the time. So you'll get people who are in a state of depression or anxiety or fear or whatever. And they'll say things like, oh, I feel so heavy today. I'm so heavy. And that's because their state of being, their emotional and mental state, is generating a low, slow frequency, which is what these low vibrational emotions resonate to. And so they feel heavy because their energy field becomes dense, because it's not vibrating quickly. And then people who are feeling joy and love and happiness, they'll say, I feel so light today, right? Because they, from that mental and emotional state, are generating frequencies, very high, fast frequencies, that make their energetic field vibrate very quickly. Now, this ring pass knot is only stopping people getting out of this nonsense if they stay within the frequency of this ring pass knot. And this is why this force and its global network, its global cult, does not want people joyful. Right. It doesn't want people happy. It doesn't want people expressing love. It wants people in anxiety and fear and what's going to happen next, and what about the kids, and are we going to put food on the table, and what about the rent, and oh my God, have you seen the price of energy? That's what they want. Oh God, there's a war now. That's what they want, because those responses, those emotional states, are holding you within the simulation, within the ring pass knot, or the Ouroboros, as some call it, like I say. So when you leave the body and you are in a high enough vibrational state to pass the ring pass knot, you just go through it. You see, you know, you can have two radio stations in the same analog system who are on completely different wavelengths, and one goes straight through the other. They're in the same space, but they're not interfering with each other. To the two radio stations, their wavelengths are so far apart, the other one doesn't exist, not even aware of it. So when you leave the body in this high vibrational state, there is no ring pass knot to you. But if you're in a low vibrational state within its frequency range of the simulation, you won't get out.
So I stay in the simulation.
Yeah, and the reincarnation cycle goes on and on and on and on. And so it comes down in the end, and this relates to something I mentioned earlier, it comes down in the end to self-identity. See, one of the things I also question and challenge in The Trap is this concept of soul. I know it may seem like semantics and words, but they're words to describe something that's different to something else. So people that believe that death doesn't mean the end, you're not just a body and you die and then you disappear. They talk about soul. Religions talk about soul. But soul is that level of consciousness that is recycled through the reincarnation cycle. For me, what we are, and I'll use this term, we are spirit. And I'll use the definition of spirit to me is that which is aware that it is all that is, has been, and ever can be. It is not the body, that's an experience. It's not even soul, that's an experience. It is spirit that is connected to all other spirit. At that level of awareness, you know that you are a point of attention within all that is, has been, and ever can be. That level of awareness, that level of self-identity, means that you are vibrating at such a level that this simulation can't hold you. If you define yourself as soul, which is, again, still part of separation, because that's the whole point of the simulation. It's to isolate consciousness in the simulation from its spirit outside the simulation. It's isolating, separating the two. So within the simulation, is all that people can perceive, and therefore they're trying to get a fix on who they are, where they are from within the simulation. And it's all about separation. So, just as a quick aside, if you wanted to give people consciousness in this reality, for instance, a sense of apartness, a sense of separation, a sense of aloneness, a sense of powerlessness, would you create a simulation where there were multiple worlds peopled by other races, other species, other forms of intelligence, where you had this interaction to learn more and expand? Would you do that if you wanted people in this sense of isolation and separation and aloneness? No, no. You'd say, gonna create a simulation where there seems to be no other life. So you look at the night sky and you're seeing all those lights, all those stars, all those planets, and if what they say about it is true, this is just an absolute fraction of what possibly exists, although I think there's more to know about that. You would get people in your simulated reality to think that despite all those lights, there's nothing out there. There's no other life. Because that gives you a sense of aloneness, of apartness, of separation. And the interaction, the, if you like, extraterrestrial interaction, if you look at it, is all it's all done as we would say on the quiet. You know what I mean? It's not, they don't just come out and say, here we are. Yeah. It's all on the quiet. So and so had this experience, so and so was abducted, all this, it's all done surreptitiously rather than openly. In the open world, we live in a lifeless universe and there is no other life but us. I mean, that's the ultimate separation, isn't it? And there's this concept called the Fermi Paradox, which a bloke called Fermi, hence the name, came up with, an Italian. And the Fermi Paradox was, all those bloody lights, all those planets, all those stars, where are the aliens? Where are the aliens? Well, if there was interaction between us and, quote, enormous numbers of aliens that you would expect in the universe, then humans would be a very different species. They'd be very much more aware, very much more knowledgeable, very much more understanding of where they are and who they are and what's going on. So, press enter, lifeless universe. It's all a simulation. Look into the night sky, you're looking at a holographic, that's why it looks so 3D and solid, a holographic simulation. And so all the pressure, all the encouragement when you're living a life in this reality alone is to think small, to identify with the body and the labels of the human life, which are limitation. I can't, it's not possible. I'm just little me, what power do I have? And in doing so, you hold people in the simulation. On and on and on and on. And you break it by realizing the true nature of who we are. We're not the body. We're not even the soul. We're not even the mind, ultimately. We are the spirit. All that is, has been, and ever can be, currently having a human experience. But separation means that people are looking to get a fix on who they are, where they are, from information being fed to them within the simulation. That's the control of perception that holds us in the trap. And So the goal of the simulation and the simulators is to hold people as much as possible in the 5 sense level of awareness, that which directly interacts with the simulation at this level, the 5 senses, kind of touch it, see it, hear it, and all that stuff, and to process all sense of reality through the 5 senses, and not to realize that the 5 senses are simply part of the trap. The body is part of the trap. The body is designed to interact with the simulation. Simple analogy. You put the headset on. That's you entering a physical body. The headset in a virtual reality game. Now, you are being fed information through the headset that then starts to dictate your reality. You see people, they're standing in a room, maybe a studio like this, whatever, room like this, and suddenly they're going, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And you're standing there going, what the hell's going on? Their reality is being dictated by the information being fed from the headset to the brain. And if you look at what a simulation is doing when they put the gloves on, they put the headset on and they put the audio on, what is a virtual reality game doing? It's overriding the 5 senses and feeding them a different source of information, which they then decode into a reality that means that they think it's real. But with a virtual reality game headset, you have the ability to go, whoa, the world's not like this. Imagine you're born with a headset on. You go through your life with a headset on. You go to your, quote, grave with a headset still on. What's going to dictate your sense of reality your entire life? The headset, the simulation. And what we are looking at in terms of the reality we experience is precisely that, except on a far greater, massively more advanced level.
Now lately they seem to have tuned up that simulation a little bit with everything that happened in 2020, 2021, 2022, you name it, from pandemics to wars to now economic consequences. I mean, it's just dialing up the fear now in that headset. That makes it even harder to get out of that simulation.
Well, there's two things really. I think the Chinese have a word that means both danger and opportunity. Yeah. And that's what the COVID hoax has given us. Because, you know, when I started out researching this 32 years ago, virtually no one wanted to know. All the way through the 90s, virtually no one wanted to know. Into the 2000s, very few wanted to know. And then it started to build, And then once COVID took off, and a lot more people realized that what's been in my books for 30 years is actually now happening on the TV news, people started to look at it differently now. So what you've had, because you know, you hear people in the alternative media, I do completely understand it, who maybe haven't been doing it as long as I have, who say, why aren't more people waking up? Well, they should have been with me in 1990, 91, 92, 93, 94, 95, 96 and onwards about why aren't more people waking up. They should have seen what it was like then. From my perspective of that, I look at the world now and I'm absolutely overjoyed, because the numbers of people who are looking at the world and themselves and their self-identity in a new light is absolutely fantastic. I've gone from walking down the street in the 90s being laughed at and shouted at and ridiculed, to people stopping me in the street all over the bloody world, asking me serious questions about what's going on and thanking me for exposing it. Now that is a transformation that is absolutely incredible compared with where we were in late 2019, early 2020, compared with where we are now. The numbers who are seeing it are just amazing. So I said at the time, I said it in our interviews, our early ones in after the COVID thing started, that this cult has now entered the room and it's heard the door click behind it. I said a long time ago, there's going to come a time when what they're doing under the radar to move forward in preparing for what they want to do, there's going to come a time when it has to break the surface. Because if you're going to transform human society, there comes a point where it has to be transformed in front of people's eyes. And then you can't hide it anymore. So what you do then is you move from hiding it to selling it, which is what they're in now. But the difference between now and early 2020 is that the number of people now who no longer trust what they're told is phenomenal compared with what went on before. I remember, I don't read comments much on stories, but I read comments depressingly around the time we did those first interviews in the spring of 2020. And there were the comments. Oh, yeah, it's a deadly virus, and people don't wear this and masks and all that through the summer. It went, and in the spring of 20, those people that don't want to lock down who go out danger the bit. Oh God, yeah. You're killing people. Yeah. Now you look. When they come out with the next one, there's a monkeypox epidemic, right? Yeah, okay. And you look at the comments. Another fake vaccine comes out, the Moderna one, just agreed by Britain, the first country to do it, for the Omicron variant. Omicron being an anagram rather of moron, or moronic, which is perfect. And you look at the comments, totally different. They've got it. They've seen what's going on in great numbers. So there's a lot to be encouraged by, as well as a lot to be challenged by. But the point I'm making here is that we have to go. This is why the trap is the deepest in the rabbit hole I've gone so far. We've got to go from just seeing this level of it and the manipulation that's going on. A lot of people have got that now. To realize that it's much bigger than just that this is just the movie screen. What's happening to make the movie screen happen? And how are we, in the end, trapped in the circumstances we are? And if you look at it on different levels, you'll see the same thing. So what I've been talking about so far is the fact that if you fall into low vibrational states of emotion and thought, and low vibrational states of consciousness, awareness, energy as a result, you become entrapped in this simulation in its multiple levels. But then you bring that down to a practical level here, and you take the emotions and the thoughts that entrap us at that level, and you bring them into this world, and you see how exactly the same emotions entrap us here. Fear. There's coming up to 8 billion people in this world. If you got to the core of this global cult, you get them into a single room. You add all the people in full knowledge who are driving this agenda. You add the law enforcement and the military who are imposing this agenda, and these gophers who are administering this agenda with no idea there is an agenda, and then you compare that number with the nearly 8 billion people who are being manipulated and being imposed upon. That number is still tiny. There's no way that that number of people can impose their will on 8 billion. Impossible unless the 8 billion, in vast numbers of the 8 billion, acquiesce to the few. That's the only way it can happen. And why do people acquiesce? Two reasons. One, then they don't have the self-respect, because that's what it is. They don't have the self-respect to question authority and what authority tells them. They just do it without question. And then there's and so that's the low vibrational, mental, emotional state of those people. They have no self-respect. They think, I'm just little me, I'm here to do what authority tells me. Authority knows best because I can't possibly, because I'm just little me. And that expresses itself in enslavement. And it expresses itself vibrationally to create that level of enslavement. But in this world, it's enslavement. Then you've got the other group, and they're the ones that don't want to do what they're told, but they're frightened of not doing so. They're fearful of the consequences of not acquiescing and obeying. As a result, they conform. And those two groups of people, Brian, the people that acquiesce without question and do as they're told, and those that don't want to do as they're told but do it anyway because they fear not doing it, those groups of people together have been responsible for every tyranny in human history. And they're responsible for this one. Fascists don't introduce fascism. There's never enough of them. What imposes fascism is the population acquiescing to fascists. That's why we have it. Not because it has to happen, but because people acquiesce. And that leaves another group, just another group. And they're the people that can see it and refuse to cooperate with it, who refuse to cooperate with their own enslavement, who refuse to do what authority says just because authority says it. And that group has ended every tyranny in human history. And these groups here need to move there, and then we'll start, and it is beginning to happen, this middle group of, I can see it, but I'm frightened of not acquiescing to it. A lot of them are moving this way, not least, by the way, because they acquiesced to the fake vaccine, being told it was safe and effective, and they now realize it's bloody neither, and they're absolutely furious that this has been imposed upon them. Those people who were told, if you're going to lose your job if you don't have the jab, I mean, when did that ever happen? They are furious, and they are moving into this camp more and more. But this is what needs to happen. People, and like I say, you can take the mental and emotional states and the self-identities that hold us in the big simulation trap, and you watch them play out here, and they have exactly the same effect. We are controlled here through low vibrational emotion, fear being the major foundation one, fear of not obeying authority, and the lack of self-respect of actually saying, well, you're telling me this, okay, evidence? Where's your evidence, mate? Johnson, Whitty, Fauci, Valance, Gates. You're telling me this, okay? Ted Ross, where's your evidence? These questions are not asked by so many people. Oh, they're telling us we've got to do that. There's deadly virus, and we've got to wear a mask, even though the holes are bigger than what are called viral particles. Or, all that stuff, it's still going to work, and it's going to protect us and stuff.
You told me before that was part of the plan. Because when they get you to believe something where there's no evidence, then you lose your respect for yourself and go into a lower vibration.
Well, exactly that.
Right?
See, what is the difference, Brian, between that group of people that obeys and believes authority without question, that which doesn't but does it anyway, and this group that says, not doing it, not cooperating? Simple thing, self-respect. You cannot have self-respect if you just take what authority tells you in all its forms without question and without research to see if it stands up to scrutiny. You cannot have self-respect if you know it's a scam, you don't want to do it, but you're too frightened not to do it. This group refuses to concede its self-respect because it says I can see it and I'm not cooperating with it. And what this group is after, what this whole force in all its multiple levels is after, is our self-respect. I mean, you know, just take the reincarnation thing, right? What I did when I was writing The Trap is I looked at the work of people who take people into another level of consciousness, hypnosis, if you like, and they take them to what they call the between life period, like between human incarnations, if you like. And what I was fascinated by, because I'm always looking for patterns and I'm always looking for common themes everywhere. And the common themes were very, very compelling again. And I'm looking at how they're describing life in the between life state in the human life state in the so-called spirit world. And it's a freaking hierarchy of control when you read it. And that's again self-respect. You know, I'm all that is and has been and ever can be. You're not going to tell me that I've got to incarnate into some, back in there. What do you mean? Who are you to tell me? It just goes on. It's the same process. And so self-respect is the bulwark against all tyranny and all tyrannical imposition. Because self-respect says, ain't doing it, ain't cooperating. So what you're looking at is a constant effort by this force to destroy your self-respect. Look, I mean, there's always been morons in politics. I mean, gee whiz. I mean, is that the statement that's most obvious ever spoken? But look at the morons in political positions of political, not real, power around the world.
We both spent a little time close to politics, didn't we?
Well, yeah, but look at Biden. I mean, the man is suffering from dementia. End of frickin' story. Everyone can see it. Elephant in the living room. You look at this guy who imposed fascism on Victoria, Australia, Daniel Andrews. Moron. You look at the people, there was a woman called Kerry Chant in New South Wales, I think it was, who was their chief medical officer. Chief medical officer, you wouldn't let her diagnose acne. Moron. Then you have people like Macron. You have the moron of morons in Canada, Trudeau. And yet, they say this is what's happening, and vast numbers of people do it. Some push back, yes, brilliant. But most people just do it. Oh, they've got to do it because Trudeau's a moron. More than that, the World Economic Forum, by this blatant fascist Klaus Schwab, fronted up by him anyway, they started something called the Young Leaders School to develop leaders to go into positions of power to impose the agenda of the World Economic Forum, which is the agenda of the cult. Some of the names: Justin Trudeau, Jacinda Ardern, who turned New Zealand fascist, Macron, who turned France fascist. On and on it goes. You see these same names. The leader of Argentina is a graduate of the World Economic Forum Young Leaders School. And they're all moronic. Now, this is where the psychology comes in, because it's all a psychological game. They got to control you psychologically, because that controls your perception, which controls your frequency, which controls if you get out here or not. So, why do they put so many morons in positions of power? Because if they can get you to see, because it's bloody obvious, that a moron is telling you to do something, and you still do it knowing they're moronic, they got your self-respect. Kaput, finished, over. And once your self-respect is gone, what is left? Submission. That's all that remains, submission. And that's why they're after people's self-respect. In all these areas now, they want to make them, and this is why we talked about the first interview we did when lockdown was coming in, that a great consequence of lockdown is going to be economic. It was obvious that it was going to be economic. They were shutting businesses down. Why wouldn't it be? Well, they didn't shut the big businesses down, just the smaller ones and the medium ones. But that was the first shot below the waterline for the world economy, and that's gone on. They're using the global warming hoax to justify the destruction of energy supply. They then have this invasion by Russia of Ukraine, Ukraine being a fundamentally corrupt country, beyond belief corrupt. And the invasion was sanctioned by Vladimir Putin, which, according to Klaus Schwab, Putin is a graduate of the Young Leaders School, according to him in an interview anyway. And so then the West say, we can't have this. It's all a game, it's all theatre. We're putting sanctions against Russia. Yeah, okay. So what sanctions are you going to put in for? Oh, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. Oh, right. So what you're doing is you're saying we're going to put sanctions against Russia, but what you're actually doing is sanctioning the West. So suddenly Europe is struggling to provide enough energy. It's going to be catastrophic in the winter. So is America. Once self-sufficient in energy, because of shutting down pipelines and other fossil fuel sources, as Europe has done, there's an energy deficit. And then you've got Russia and China, who are just going along and using fossil fuels like before, with no shutting it down at all, and more coal-fired power stations being produced in China. And what has happened? Systematically, the energy price is going through the roof, and we've seen nothing yet.
Inflation.
Inflation. And another thing about inflation, look at all the fresh air, so-called printed money, based on nothing, that was produced to respond to COVID. As I've said over the years, this agenda is to create a world government, and it would dictate to every community, and we would see the end of countries. So what's happening is, and not least because of what's happened with the COVID, the hoax, is that countries have gone into fantastic amounts of debt, and by pouring money into the economy, fresh air money backed by nothing, And that's created this massive inflation, but it's also created massive debt. We've just had the American government introduce something called the Inflation Reduction Bill that does nothing to reduce inflation, it never meant to, but is going to put another $750 billion into the economy, massively increasing inflation. At the same time, over this period, and this is all part of the big chessboard, at the same time, over decades, we've had Western companies, Western governments supporting it, not least in America, who have transferred production to China and the Far East controlled by China. So now China, the alleged enemy, and I say alleged enemy because China's controlled by the cult just as the West is controlled by the cult. It's all a game. There's no borders with the cult. That's for only public consumption. China now has massive control of the global supply chain. And so it has control of even basic things like, from a medical point of view, antibiotics. Right up into the 90% of antibiotics in America come from China. Right? That's what's happened. So why has the American government, under successive administrations and American corporations, been transferring control of the supply chain to China? Because China is owned by the cult, and America, the government, corporations, is owned by the cult. And so they've been doing what advances the cult agenda. Why have they been giving it to China? The Mao Revolution in China was a cult revolution, and it was designed to create a closed society, for a long time it was, within which a global control system could be played out, to incubate and develop within the Chinese borders a surveillance and control system based on technology and AI, which when perfected and incubated would be played out across the world and become the global system. So all aces are being given, are being given to China for that reason, because the Chinese system is meant to be the global system. I've been saying for decades, if you want to see the West tomorrow, look at China today. And where did the COVID hoax come out of? China. And what has happened since that card was played? The West has become more and more and more like China, not least in its AI control and surveillance systems, etc. And so all this is being done, and the effect on the population is increasing dependency. I saw a story, tragic story this week, of a woman who has been put into hospital twice with malnutrition because she's skipping meals so her children can eat. At the end of all the other bills being paid, she's left with £40 to spend on food, and therefore she can feed her children. She can't feed herself. As the energy price goes up and up and up, because of the sanctions on Russia and the shutting down of fossil fuel sources of power, how much of that £40 is going to be left soon? And that is creating a sense of dependency, or a state of dependency. The food bank lines are getting longer and longer and longer all over the world. It's creating dependency. And what is it also destroying? Self-respect. And this is another means by which self-respect is being eliminated. And we must not fall for it. And this is the plan. I've been saying this for so bloody long. You destroy the ability of people to make an independent income. You destroy independent business, small business, family business, medium business, even big business that the cult's not controlling. And you destroy the independent income of all the people working for those businesses. You are destroying jobs at a fantastic rate by replacing people with AI and technology faster and faster and faster. And so what you're doing is creating, and it's being fueled by what's happening with the supply chains, which you destroy supply chains, the price goes up, inflation, price goes up, energy price up. All that's happening. You're creating enormous and gatheringly enormous numbers of people who have no means of the basics of life. And if you want another word for control, it is dependency. Dependency equals control by that on which you depend. And thus, this was in my book so long ago. The plan is that they come forward and they say the world is in such a mess, and these countries and these national governments have caused it, even though we, who are now saying we'll sort out the mess, have been working through those governments and the gophers in that government to bring about the very mess we now say we will sort out, problem, reaction, solution. We must have a great reset to save the world and people. They're going to come forward, it's already happening, and they're going to say the only way to sort this out is to have people given a guaranteed income.
They're already talking about it, aren't they?
And the guaranteed income, I was writing this in the books way before it was ever mentioned publicly, but now it's everywhere. We will give you a guaranteed income, which will be a pittance, to pay for the basics of life. It won't. But you're only going to get it if you do as you're told. If you're a dissident against the system, if you're challenging the system and questioning the system, you ain't going to get it. And oh, by the way, if you don't accept it, how else are you going to earn a living? We've destroyed everything else. That's the idea. And it's unfolding before our eyes if only people would care to look. It's at a very fast rate. But, and I keep coming back to this, Brian, it can only happen if people acquiesce to it. Right. If a few can't control billions unless the billions acquiesce. And we've left it late in the day to stop doing it, but it's still possible. And the encouraging thing is more and more people are seeing it, which they didn't see before.
Yet so many people have so much fear and stress in their life because of money, lack of money, inflation, controls. If someone's listening to this right now and they want to escape the trap, how do they separate from something when it's almost just a life force to them? You know, they've been given little bits by the government, a little bit more by the government. Now it's being controlled. How do they get into a state of not going back into that low vibration all the time?
Well, I mean, what people have got to start doing is starting to organize among themselves into mutual support groups outside of the system. And this is happening. There are more and more people who are starting to do this. But it's interesting, you watch the sequence. As I've said for years and years, know the outcome and you'll see the journey. Know where we're being taken and you'll see the steps every day in that direction. If you don't know the outcome, those steps seem random and unexplainable. You know the outcome, you can see exactly why they're being done. This guaranteed income, people were being prepared for it by the COVID payments. How many people were quite happy with lockdown because they were getting a good chunk of their income paid by the government? A lot of businesses weren't, they went under, but employees were, and therefore that they were dependent on the government in that period. And it got a lot of them used to being dependent on the government. And now a lot of people, they don't want to go back to how it was before. They want to work from home and all that stuff, separation. And so you can see the progression of preparing people for this dependency state, control state, which is leading to this guaranteed income. And so when you, this also explains to a large extent this apparent kind of contradiction where you have lots of jobs that can't be filled because nobody bloody wants them. And we've got this problem. We're short-staffed. I said to a guy once, well, employ some taller people. But we're short-staffed, and you're short-staffed. Well, there's lots of people who haven't got jobs. Why are you short-staffed? And it's this seed change that's going on from making your own independent income and it's going to a point where you're dependent on the government. And the more they destroy the economy, which is the whole plan, the more you become dependent on the government. And this is another thing. As well as vastly rising energy prices and the price of everything else, you've got the rising price of food. Food's going through the roof. Isn't it amazing how many food processing plants in America have been destroyed by fire, including small planes flying into them, and how many chickens and other birds in farms have been destroyed in their multi-millions in America alone because of, quote, bird flu. By the way, how do you know they've got bird flu? Well, they tested positive with a PCR test. Yeah, that's not testing for a virus, mate. Just as it wasn't testing for COVID. Because as the creator, Kerry Mullis, said, and I remember I said this, on April the 6th, 2020, the PCR test is not testing for a virus, and the creator, Kerry Mullis, a biochemist in America who won the Nobel Prize for developing it because of what it did was brilliant, but what it didn't do, as he said, is tell you if you're sick or not. And yet they've been using the PCR test not only to test for COVID, that's where the cases have come from, but to test for bird flu, and millions and millions of birds are being killed, tens of millions actually, because they've tested positive with a test not testing for the virus they are supposed to have. And then you ask the question, why is Bill Gates, Mr. Vaccine, Mr. Fake Vaccine, Bill Gates, or Mr. We're all going to die from global warming, Gates, why is he now the biggest owner of farmland in America and food production land? Why has the Dutch government, a guy called Rutte, the Prime Minister, completely owned by the World Economic Forum and Klaus Schwab, why has he just announced that the Netherlands, the second biggest exporter of food in the world, is targeting farmers to destroy them and get them off the land, which is where all these farming protests in the Netherlands have come from. At a time of food shortages and supply chain problems, you are targeting the second biggest exporter of food in the bloody world to destroy its farming base? Why are you doing that? If people depend on you for what's left of the food, you control them. Where food is abundant and cheap, you do not control them. Where energy is cheap and abundant, you do not control them. Scarcity equals dependency equals control. And that's why they're targeting the food chain, they're targeting the energy supply, they're targeting everything. And this is where the global warming hoax target energy, and the COVID hoax, and the war in Ukraine, and all these things come together into the same pattern to the same end. You look at the solutions to global warming and its centralization of power and control over the fine detail of your life. You look at the solutions to COVID, what was it? the centralized control over the fine detail of your life. And what gives them that control? Energy prices going through the roof, food prices going through the roof, and so on. It's all connected, and it's happening in front of our eyes. And what's great, as I say, is more and more people are seeing it and connecting the dots and realizing the world I thought I was living in is not the world I'm living in.
Yeah. What's going to happen at the end of this year? It's August now. Are we going to see another lockdown for winter? And what does it look like for the next year or two, do you think? And you'd called it the totalitarian tiptoe before, where they take things away from you, they give a few things back, but now you're conditioned to that, whether that comes to checks, to lockdowns, to mandatory masks and vaccines. How do you see this playing out?
Well, it's all a psychological game. Whatever they do in the so-called outer world is aimed at your mind. So masks were aimed at your mind. That was, if you want to symbolize, literally symbolize silence, put something over someone's mouth. And there's been study after study after study that's come out through this summer from so-called experts anyway, that say that the masks are useless and played no part in protecting anyone from anything. That lockdowns were useless and played no part in protecting anyone from anything. In fact, quite the opposite. In both cases, it was detrimental, very detrimental. And so, obviously, these things were not put into place to do what they said they were doing them for. They were for the reasons and many more that we've talked about. And what do they want? Okay, let's go back to know the outcome and they'll see the journey. You'll see the journey. This is what they want. They want a global system whereby a tiny few at the top of the pyramid hierarchy are controlling, again, the fine detail of the lives of everyone on the planet. And I've called this way back, decades, I called it something else before, but since the Hunger Games movie trilogy came out, I have called it the Hunger Games Society. And just make the point, this was in my books long, long, long before COVID appeared. If you imagine a pyramid, the top of the pyramid is a tiny few people, the inner core of this cult. People call it the 1%, much less than 1%. At the bottom of the pyramid is basically the rest of humanity. And in between the two is a police military, because they want to fuse the two eventually, a police military state to impose the will of the few on the rest and to stop the rest challenging the few. That's what they want. Now, if you are going to put people in that position, you've got to make them dependent on the few. You've got to destroy their independent income so they're dependent on the few. This is what we've just been discussing is all about. And so all the things that would put people in a state of dependency, a state of control, a state of submission, a state of deleted self-respect, that is what's going to be played out through this winter and beyond. All the different elements that would make that happen. So they're going to absolutely assault the population economically. They're going to make people absolutely destitute because of the high price of everything. That's all part of it. And they are going to play other pandemics of various kinds, whether they repeat COVID or they come up with another one, monkeypox. That went well, didn't it, Tedros? To create this ability to justify, first of all, that central echelon of the pyramid of the police military state imposing the will. We saw that in COVID all over the world, how brutally it was imposed. And so these things are all going to be played out. But they have a more difficult problem this time because of people becoming more and more streetwise. Like, they came out with monkeypox and people laughed. It was memed into ridicule. They're even trying to say, oh, we've got to change the name of monkeypox. Yeah, because it's a memer's dream, mate, isn't it, right? So we've got to change the name, make it sound scary. And so all these things will continue. But they're playing a different game now in the sense that more and more people can see what they're doing. So it's going to be more and more difficult. Well, I hope it's going to be more and more difficult. And this is where we come back to this. Lots of people have moved into this middle echelon of people who can see it, right? But so far, fear of not acquiescing has made them, acquiesce to it. If more and more people in that group moved into this group, I can see it and I'm not doing it, I'm not cooperating with it, and I think that is happening, I know it's happening, then it's more and more difficult this time than it's ever been. Because spring of 2020, how many people were pushing back? People were like, there's a deadly virus, everyone's saying so. Yes, everyone's saying so, because it's coming from the same source, mate. And so they went meekly under lockdown because they thought that was the way to protect themselves from this deadly virus that wasn't. But that's not where we are now. There is a very, very much greater number of people who've got it. They've got it. You can see it in the comments, like I said, on the stories. I've got it. The way they're reacting. Oh, they're new vaccine. Oh, yeah, I can see what's going on. Yeah, they got it. So they're playing a different game now. And it's going to be much more difficult for them to sell it. Well, it's in the sense of vast numbers of people, it's going to be impossible for them to sell it. The question is, how many people who can see it, because they're not buying it, how many will move into this group of people and say, we're not cooperating? That will decide where we go from here. And, you know, people must understand this, Brian. They are cooperating with total and utter evil. It's one of the most difficult things to get across over the decades has been the level of evil we're dealing with, because people don't normally in their everyday lives interact with that level of evil. So it's very difficult for them to comprehend it. And you hear people say, they'd never do that. Oh, not only would they do it, they'll get off on it, mate. The more suffering, the more they get off on it. This is what we're dealing with. These people have no empathy, no compassion. Evil for me it is defined as absence of love, absence of empathy, absence of compassion. You take those things out, there are no limits to the suffering and the horrors that they will impart on other people, and get off on it. So that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with that level of evil. So when you're acquiescing to authority, ultimately what you're doing is you're acquiescing to that level of evil. You might not have that level of evil immediately interacting with you, with the system and authority. It might just be a moron doing as he's told. But ultimately where it's coming from is sheer undiluted evil. And that's the world you are condemning yourself to, and you're condemning your children and grandchildren to, if you acquiesce to it. There is no way in the world that this ends well if we go on acquiescing. No way. Because it's like you acquiesce and then they want more. And you acquiesce to that and then they want more. And eventually you're in a tyranny the like of which is almost hard to comprehend. So we've got to draw a line. And it better be drawn now, and say here and no further. And by the way, we've got to start rolling this back. We're not going to concede to our own enslavement and our kids' and grandkids' enslavement anymore. Not one single inch. And I've said this so many times over the years, if people come out of Downing Street, whoever the next puppet is, or they come out of the White House, whoever the next puppet is, and they say, we've had a discussion and this is what's going to happen. If you're Christopher bloody Whitty, what the hell has happened to him, by the way? Bloody demanifested. And your Patrick Valences and your Faucis, they come out and they say in these press conferences, we've decided this is what's going to happen. Everyone's going to wear a mask and you've got a social distance and you can't go out. Well, they have power to impose that only through the acquiescence of the population to what they say must happen. So, everyone's got to wear a mask. Vast numbers of people. Up yours, mate. No chance. How do you enforce that? It's unenforceable.
Can't.
It's too many people. Social distancing. I've not, since this started, I didn't lock down. I went out when I wanted. I didn't social distance. If people wanted to go around me, that's their choice. Be my guest. But I'm not frightened of you, so I'm not going around you. And I didn't wear a mask not once. You must be joking. Didn't do any of it. And if enormous numbers of people, not even half, nothing like half, but enormous numbers of people had gone down that route, it would have been unenforceable. Unenforceable. And so people say, you know, we've got to fight. We've got to fight the enemy. We've got to fight the cult. No, we haven't. What you fight, you become. History is littered with people fighting tyranny who became tyrannical. You don't have to fight tyranny. You simply don't cooperate with it. You use the power of no. Because we have the numbers, the tyranny does not. It's the mathematics, it's the pocket calculator that tells you what the dynamic is. And it's fear of expressing that dynamic of the many on the few that allows the few to control the many through acquiescence. So again and again you come to the same 0 point. If we acquiesce, tyranny is certain. If we don't in enough numbers, tyranny is history.
David, where does identity come into all of this? Because it seems to be getting split into more and more sections and subsections. And you look at America, it's like all of these new groups fighting with all of these other new groups about issues that didn't seem to exist when I was a kid. This seems to be independent of all the other things you're talking about, okay, economic hardship, fear, vaccines. But is it all part of the same strategy of division?
It's not. I would say probably I never see anything happen that is not connected to everything else. As I say, I'm always looking for patterns and common themes, and they're everywhere. So you bring up a very good point. I was saying earlier, I've been saying for decades, about self-identity and how they are, as I've said it already in this chat, how they want us to self-identify with the labels of a human life. Because the more we identify and focus our attention and self-identity on the labels of a human life, the I am ours, as I call them, I am our man, I am our woman, I am our this race, that race, or whatever, this sexuality, the more you are disconnecting from the influence of your expanded levels of consciousness. They are out the game. You are separating from them. Remember what I said about disconnecting from spirit outside the simulation? So you isolate the consciousness in the simulation and then you feed it a sense of reality that keeps it there, ongoing. So from that perspective, look at what's happened. What you've just described is the subdivision of the previous labels. So instead of I am our man, I am our woman, it's I am this sexuality, whatever. So people are now self-identifying the I with their sexual preference. If anything's an experience, it's a sexual preference. I mean, you experience a sexual preference through the body, right? So at the end of the life, a human life, the body is no more. So by definition, your sexual preference is a body thing. Your sexual experience is a sexual experience of the body overwhelmingly. So it's focusing attention on a tiny, tiny sense of self-identity. And now we're seeing this row of letters, LBGDQ, blah, 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 blah. Okay, there was 26 letters in one, not 26, there was 26 letters in the alphabet, but there was must have been 18 letters, nearly 20 that I've seen in the longest one ever. It was used by some American university to describe the fine, fine, fine detail of people's sexuality. So if they're self-identifying with these letters, that's me, I'm that letter, I am, then I am all that is, has been, and ever can be. No, I'm not. I'm a human. No, I'm not. I'm a man. I'm a woman. No, I'm not. I'm my sexuality, preference. And what you're doing is you are creating an ever more myopic sense of the I. And the more myopic your sense of the I becomes and your focus of attention, who are you, I am this, that, or the other, whatever the letter is, the more the influence of your expanded consciousness, the true I, the infinite I, is out of the game. Because your focus of attention is only on this tiny, tiny smear of possibility you call your sexual preference. And, you know, this whole explosion of transgender came out of nowhere. Very simple, you know, there's very simple things that you can use to see through things. And one of them is, if something's come out of nowhere and suddenly it's everywhere, someone's pressed the button on the next stage of the agenda, right? And this transgender thing is very interesting because so many dots connect into it. I've been saying for a long, long time that the plan was to create a new form of human body, to move from the biological body to a far more synthetic biological body that would be much more amenable to surviving the enormous radiation onslaught that is coming in through what they call the smart grid, where all these low orbit satellites, not least through Elon Musk, you know, freedom of speech, Elon, yeah, okay, mate, yeah. You're not part of the cult, are you? No, yeah, I believe you. Anyway, he's putting all these low orbit satellites up, or his company, SpaceX is, he's just a front man, to fire 5G, and now 6G and 7G are going to follow, to create what I called a long time ago the technological sub-reality, based on technologically generated radiation. And it's now called the smart grid. That's why everything's called smart. Smart this, smart that, smart the other. And the impact, for a start, there are many other reasons for this, but the impact of that, as it increases and increases and increases on the biological body, is going to be, it's very hard for the biological body to survive. So they're moving, and there's many other reasons why they're doing it, but they're moving to a much more synthetic body. This is why they are putting synthetic genetic material, self-replicating into the body through these fake vaccines. And if you call the current body human 1.0, and you call this synthetic body they want human 2.0, human 2.0 is not meant to procreate. It's meant to be created technologically, the species to be created technologically, which is what Aldous Huxley described in Brave New World in 1932. There's a reason why he could know that. And so what we're seeing is the movement from human 1.0 to human 2.0. And many dots come into this. If you're going to make that transition, you have to phase out human 1.0, right? This is why sperm counts are absolutely catastrophically plummeting all over the world, especially in the West, but all over the world. This is why, as doctors and scientists who had the guts to speak out, very few, before this vaccine rollout, were saying this could have a catastrophic effect on female fertility, right? And this is a targeting of human fertility of human 1.0 because they're phasing it out. Human 2.0 is designed not to be transgender, but to be no gender, to be produced technologically so there's no need for men or women. There's no need for parents. Now, lots of things come out of this, and it's all in Brave New World if you want to read it, but it's happening now. The technology that Huxley described, like artificial wombs, they're being played out now. It's happening, it's being introduced. And as I keep saying over the years, whatever you see in the public arena is light years technologically, in technological terms, it's light years behind what's in the underground bases and the secret projects to be played out when the time is considered right to bring it in. So, but we're seeing artificial wombs now. And we're seeing studies saying, oh, this is more efficient than a woman's womb. You can see where it's going. And so they start targeting men. Toxic masculinity. Well, for two reasons. Toxic masculinity, as it's called, is the kind of masculinity that stands up and says, I'm not having it. So you don't want that. This is why, with sperm counts plummeting, testosterone counts are plummeting. And so they target men to demonize men, especially white men, but men in general. And I said at the time that toxic masculinity stuff started, they're coming for the women next. And now they're coming for the women. Why? Because they don't need men or women anymore. Because where they're going is this non-procreating human that doesn't need parents. And it will be brought up by the state in exactly the way that Huxley described. So if you're moving from a two-sex gender reality that procreate the species to a no-gender human that does not procreate the species, then you have a transitional period to overcome. So, on the road to what is actually the plan of fusing gender into a no gender, you confuse gender on the road to that. So they are targeting the young, especially the young and children, because they are going to be the adults when this comes in full blown. And so they're being programmed to do that. And you know they're being programmed. There was one study very recently where they looked at the number of young people and children who were questioning their gender and whether they were another gender. And the figures have gone through the roof. It's incredible. Now, they looked at Republican states and they looked at Democrat states. Now, because of the nature of the Democrat supporters, the wokers, and the Republican supporters, I don't support any of them, it's a one-party state, but you look at the supporters of the Republican Party, they are people that push back on this stuff, whereas the wokers supporting the Democrats are all in favor of it. So what did the study find? In Democrat-controlled states, the number of young people and children questioning their gender and wanting to change their gender was soaring. In Republican states, where from the voters you have the pushback, it was much less. And that tells you something very clear. This massive, sudden questioning of gender by the young is not something that's naturally occurring. It's being created by programming and by indoctrination. Schools today, schools today have taken programming into MK Ultra levels in terms of what they're doing to the psyche of the kids. Whether it's the human caused global warming hoax, whether it's the transgender thing, whatever it is, it's absolutely blatantly obvious programming. So you confuse gender in the young, but where you're leading is not to transgender, you're leading to no gender. That's where it's going, and that's why it's being done. And the fake vaccines are, this is why they want them in everybody. You know, yes, it's, in part it's depopulation, absolutely it is. When you see what people are pulling out of these people, these vaccinated people who've died, when you see what they're pulling out of their arteries, their veins, their bodies, who's going to survive that? But yes, so it's partly that. But it's also about transforming that which survives, that which transitions into a completely different human. And so they want everybody. It's like Gates said at the start of the COVID vaccine rollout, fake vaccine rollout, every man, woman, and child on the planet should have this vaccine. That's what he said. Why do they want that? Because they want to transform the human race into a different form, and so they want everybody, especially the young. And I tell you what I suggest is going to happen. When the young today who've been fake vaccinated, and the young who've been fake vaccinated, and people even a bit older, when they get to child producing age, men and women, they're going to find they can't. They're going to find they can't. Because this is about phasing out human 1.0 into human 2.0. And when you look at it, Brian, and we'll come back to how we kind of really started this, and so many people now, more than ever before, are starting to get this. When I first came out with the fact that behind it all, this was a long time ago now, back in the 90s, behind all this is a non-human force. Of course, it was, oh, that Ike's mad. Okay. But things are changing. Because I tell you what people are starting to realize. They're starting to realize that when they look at the totality of what's going on, it is an anti-human agenda. It's anti-human. You look at all the basics of human life necessary to survive, and they're after all of them. They're after the food, they're controlling the water, they're seeking to change the very nature of the human body with these synthetic fake vaccines. And they're playing with the atmosphere. They're changing the atmosphere in many various ways. And, you know, the foundation of this reality, this simulation, is the electromagnetic spectrum. And we, on one level, energetic fields, people call them the auric field, whatever, is an electromagnetic entity, an electromagnetic field. What are they doing? they are transforming the electromagnetic field which we are living in into a completely different state. This is what the towers all over the world are increasingly. This is what the low orbit satellites, and they have permission, people like Musk, for tens of thousands of them, that are firing this technologically generated radiation, 5G, I could say 6G, 7G to come. And the idea is to hit every single inch of the planet with this stuff. Why? Because they are creating a technological sub-reality. That's what the smart grid is. You've got this simulation, this reality. Now they're creating a simulation within a simulation called the smart grid. And then they're in the process of creating a simulation within a simulation within a simulation, which is what they call the metaverse. And at each level of the simulation, people are being pulled more and more and more into the fake realities of these multiple simulations and out of the expanded consciousness, the spirit that they really are. So the very field that we are interacting with is being transformed by this onslaught of technologically generated radiation. And okay, what is this radiation? It is frequency. What generates, what is generated by human thought and emotion? It's frequency. And the throttle goes both ways. You can have thoughts and emotions that generate a frequency, but you can have a frequency fired at you which generates thoughts and emotions that relate to that frequency. So if you're in an electromagnetic field, a technologically generated electromagnetic field, if they fire the right frequencies through that field, they can make you depressed, they can make you anxious, they can make you fearful. What does that mean? They can hold you in a low vibrational state, which means you never get out of here. And so what we're seeing are these different levels of illusion that are being introduced, and the whole reality that we're experiencing is being transformed. And part of that transformation, I said earlier, the body is part of the simulation that interacts with the simulation and connects us with it. Well, as the new simulation, the smart grid, the simulation within a simulation is created.
Within a simulation, and within a simulation. Why do you need those inside of each other?
Okay. What if you're in a maze within a maze within a maze? You've got to
never getting out.
You've got to suss the first maze,
right,
before you suss there's a second maze. You've got to suss the second maze before you suss there's a third maze. So basically, it's a level of perceptual bewilderment and distortion and misdirection that is designed to keep you permanently not understanding who you are, where you are, and what you're experiencing. And the fact that they're introducing these other simulations within a simulation actually tells you how fearful they are that humanity is starting to awaken. Mm-hmm. So they're trying to, you're starting to suss this trap, so we'll create another one, we'll create another one. And if you are living your life through the metaverse while you are also within the smart grid, while you're also within the greater simulation, what frickin' chance have you got here of understanding what the hell you are or what the hell is going on? You've got no chance. And you know, there's things that like I say, that tell you that tell you whether something's positive or not. Does Gates support it? Does Zuckerberg support it? Does Bezos support it? Does Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum support it? Well, they all support the frickin' metaverse. They all support the smart grid. They all support... This is the thing. It's like Tony Blair in this country. When they open their mouth, the cult is speaking. If you want to know the agenda, listen to what Gates wants, Schwab wants, Blair wants. Blair's a gopher within a gopher, but he's articulating the agenda. They're telling you what the plan is by what they say must happen. And so anything they support is not good for humanity, simple as that. And so, again, we're looking at these different simulations within a simulation. They're after this. They're after perception, confusing perception. If you are, as people like Ray Kurzweil at Google, this Google executive futurist, is saying, and others are saying, because like I said earlier, they've moved from hiding it to selling it now, because it's coming in, so they can't hide it anymore. They've got to sell it. And what Kurzweil has been saying for some time, it's been in my books for ages, is that by 2030, which is a massive year, which keeps coming up for all these different agendas, 2030, by 2030, they're going to start to connect the human brain to AI. And in Kurzweil's words, not mine, from that when that connection's made, AI will do more and more of human thinking until human thinking is basically negligible. In other words, the human mind, as we know it, is replaced by AI, at which point they do not have to manipulate our perception anymore through control of information and what have you. It's going to come direct through AI. And one of the things that's in these fake vaccines is nanotechnology. Nanotechnology is meant to connect us to the smart grid, to this technological sub-reality being fired at us from the sky and mass all over the place. So if you are, if you're trying to isolate your entrapped, simulation-entrapped consciousness from its greater, infinite, eternal spiritual self, spirit self, then you want this level tapped in to a fake reality that thinks it's real. Now, you've got the greater simulation, but now you've got another simulation, which is the smart grid. And the nanotechnology in these fake vaccines is designed to interact with the 5G, with the technological sub-reality, so that the technological sub-reality is feeding us our perceptions. It's feeding us our sense of reality. Out there doesn't exist, mate. Doesn't exist, nothing there, nothing to see there, move along. This is your reality. And they're openly telling you that this is what they're doing now. You know, people never ask this one question. They talk about AI. They talk about, oh, AI does this, AI does that. They never ask this question. What is AI? What is it? Okay, on one level, it's algorithms. You're right, yeah. Another level, it's what they call learning AI, where it's AI which they are feeding all the time fantastic amounts of information. When you go onto Facebook or you go onto these platforms and you give over the fine details of your life, that's being fed into AI. It's being fed into this learning, quote, AI. And this AI is learning more and more about humans, what makes humans tick, how humans react, how humans can be manipulated and directed, because it's receiving all the information you are giving it all the time. So AI knows more about humans than humans know about humans already. Okay, so there's that. But what about another level of AI? What is AI? It's a form of electronic radiation, electromagnetic awareness in its more deeper levels, its more expanded levels. So, what is it? It's frequencies, right? Frequencies, yeah, okay. So, what does consciousness give off? What is consciousness at this level? It's electromagnetic. So, what if the level of AI that is being connected to the human brain is not algorithmic AI, it's not learning AI even. What if it is the consciousness of this demonic level that's orchestrating this entire reality and simulation? What if it is being connected technologically by frequency interaction to us? So we become it. And I've been writing in the books for decades about the plan for what I called the assimilation. The assimilation of human consciousness into this controlling force. And that is what I say that AI connection to the human mind is really about. And there's something in these fake vaccines that is very much related to that ongoing process of assimilating human consciousness, the human mind, into AI. And you know, the last thing that anyone should agree to is to be connected to AI. But you know, those that have studied the effects of these fake vaccines, they're talking about how these nanoparticles are getting into the brain. Now, the brain operates electrically and electromagnetically. That's how it processes what we call thought. So you introduce this nanotechnology into the brain, you're rewiring the brain. You rewire a computer, you are manipulating what the computer will process as information and what it won't. You are changing the perceptions of the brain and the person by how the brain processes information. This is what's happening. So nanotechnology, and people talk about being microchipped, and they think about these rice-sized chips that people put in their wrists. Thousands have been chipped like that in Sweden, so they can open a bloody door without pushing, lazy buggers. But the real connection, the real chip connection to AI and the smart grid is nanotechnology that's well beyond the ability of human sight to see. And that's what's going into the bodies of people all over the world through these fake vaccines. So the influence of this self-replicating nanotechnology, you can see it in the studies that have been done. There's pictures of this stuff. It's weird stuff of self-replicating, building constructs in the body. It's connecting people more and more to this technological sub-reality, which will impact upon their ability to produce their own thoughts. Because the idea is that human thoughts as we know them should disappear as the assimilation is complete. So we are really in a situation, Brian, where this is the last chance corral. We've got to take our minds back before they're taken away.
It's 8 years left until 2030.
Well, that's Kurzweil's year, 2030, and like I say, it comes up more and more and more in various different areas. You know, I mean, the United Nations has what it calls Agenda 2030. Agenda 2030 is exactly describing this global tyranny that I've described, where a central group, i.e. the United Nations morphing into a world government, controls everything. This is in the documents. They control all water. They control water to the point, and this is happening in some American states already, whereby the state claims to own the water that falls as rain on your land. Extraordinary. And control of food, control of everything is in these documents and these agendas of Agenda 2030, the UN agenda. And again, it's the same year, 2030. And it comes up, like I say, in many and various ways. So that is a target year for this thing to really start to be introduced. And that's why things are starting to get faster. And the destruction of the economy to break the spirit of the people and bring them into acquiescence and submission is getting faster and faster. And our spirit, our backbone, expressed through spirit, has to face the fact that this is something that if we don't stand up against it, stop cooperating with it, then the future is Klaus Schwab's.
So ultimately, how do we escape the trap? Being aware of it, then changing your energy, trying to vibrate at a higher energy source. Are those the ways?
For me, Brian, and I've said this, you know, for so long, it's about self-identity. It's all about self-identity. If people go on self-identifying as a human being, not that a human being is not the experience they're having, but the human being is what they are. That they are their name, they are their sexuality, their race, their religion, their income bracket, then they have got no chance of escaping the trap. If they go on believing that there's a level beyond that of understanding, which is that actually we're just having experiences to learn lessons so that we can come to a state of enlightenment to get out of the cycle of reincarnation, then they have got no chance of getting out of the trap. None. Because they'll go on doing that. The way out of the trap is to realize there is no trap. If you self-identify with being that level of spirit that is beyond the simulation, that level of spirit that is all that is, has been, and ever can be, that is eternal, indestructible, and infinite, and that's who you are, and you don't do that as a concept, I conceive myself to be. You live it. You know it. You know you are spirit. You know you are all that is, has been, and ever can be. You know there's nothing you cannot create, manifest. There's nothing to stop you because you are unstoppable. Then you're out here. Then you're out here. And that's the realization this cult and its demonic masters, literally, do not want us to understand.
Because we can all be free from them if we could just get to that level.
Yeah, exactly. That's not, it's not about even getting to that level. That's who we are. It's remembering that's who we are that takes you to that. So, they've sold us this world is all there is science, which says we're a cosmic accident that came from nothing and goes to nothing. We are just the body. Genetics is everything. It ain't. Gotcha. They've sold us religion. You are just a little person and you have to do what God says because God's greater than you and you're just little, you are. Gotcha. I'm God-fearing. Gotcha. Oh, well, no, it's about reincarnation. You have to keep learning lessons to learn how to get out here and get enlightened. Gotcha. I am God. We are all God. We are all infinite awareness, having a brief human experience in a trap to entrap our perception. But I am beyond it all. I am all that is, has been, never can be. Out of here. Trap gone. No trap. That's what they don't want us to know.
Right. And that's always been your mentality, because you always say this at the end of every one of our episodes, David. You're always saying, they can't hurt me. I'm already at this other level. I'm always this other level. I am this energy level. And that's why I'm fearless, and that's why they'll never have control of me. You've always been there.
And that's not because I'm Buddha sitting cross-legged on a mountain or under a tree. It's because I remember who I am and what I am. And that is the same as everybody else's.
Right.
Everybody else's. And I said once in one of our chats, I think I looked at the camera or something, and I said to this cult, I'm coming for you. You're not going to succeed. And you can't stop me. And I am. And they can't. And they're not. Know who you are. And it's over. Yeah. Believe who they want you to believe you are. Tyranny.
Because they have no power over you when you are thinking that way. None.
They have no power.
Right, exactly.
Their power is the power we give them. Yeah. And we must not fall for the idea, oh, these demons, they're ever so... People are believing it. These demons are ever so powerful. They're not bloody powerful at all. They're a bunch of prats. That's what they are. But they're very skilled at getting us to give our power to them, which they recycle back against us as control and tyranny through acquiescence. That's what they're skilled at, but they're a bunch of prats. Have you seen Bill Gates? You know, is there life on Bill Gates? I see no evidence. Klaus Schwab, have you seen him? He's a pillock, he's a prat. He's a gopher. Oh, Klaus Schwab, he's got so much... Oh, shut up. Shut up. We've got to understand where the real power is. It's with us. And if we stop giving it away, they have none. You see, the very fact that you are in a state of perception, that you want control over others, you want power over others, you get off from their suffering, indeed you feed off the energy of their suffering, that's all part of it. When that Morpheus character in the Matrix held the battery up and said the machines have turned humans into one of these, that's exactly what's happening, because they're feeding off our energy, low vibrational energy, and they can only feed off our low vibrational energy because they're in a state of low vibrational awareness. And so if you want power over people and you get off on people suffering, you are in a very low vibrational, very limited state of stupidity and ignorance. That's not powerful. The way they've done it is that they are hoarding knowledge about how this all works, and they're keeping it from the population by selling us an illusion. And so this cult has a major symbol, which is the all-seeing eye. You see it on the dollar bill, you see it on the reverse of the Great Seal of the United States, you see it many, many different places, the all-seeing eye. It's a single eye, right? Very appropriate. Because nothing is more descriptive of this cult and its demonic masters than in the kingdom of the blind, the one-eyed man is king. They are the one-eyed man, and they control us only by making us blind. When we awaken to two-eyed, three-eyed, third-eyed, infinite awareness of self, this bunch of prats, it's over for them. And they know it. The great terror they have is humanity waking up to its true nature. That's the great fear it has, and it works 24/7 to suppress us from remembering our true state. And you know, another thing, Brian, that people are saying now, not only that it's obviously an anti-human agenda. Oh, do you think that could be because it's a non-human force that's behind it? I think that's possible. They're also saying this, interestingly. You may have heard this. It's being said more and more. It's a spiritual war, isn't it? Well, I don't like using the word war because I don't, you know, what you fight, you become. But it is a spiritual tussle between a force that wants to hold us in spiritual ignorance and a force beyond that that is encouraging us and teasing us to awaken to the fact that we are not the I we believed we are the infinite I. And when we believe that, when we know that, when we live that, the game is over. And that's what this force is terrified of. And that's why these people are so pathetic. I mean, that Bill Gates, he's got so much power. Oh, do leave off. Do leave off. He's a bloody gopher. When the Rockefellers say jump, he breaks the Olympic high jump record. When that bit above the Rockefellers say jump, the Rockefellers break the Olympic high jump record. I mean, you know, these are all gophers. They're not powerful people, but they're very skillful at getting us to give our power to them, and that's how they control. We stop doing that, it's over. Even now, at this late stage, it's over.
Right, we can still do it. And every child is born into this world at that higher state of consciousness. It's just they're indoctrinated into this, I think you used to call it a postage stamp mentality with all of these rules and all these things, and then they become the perfect little piece of their organization. But like you said, it's not like we have to get there. We're already there.
We're already there.
Right. We're just
already there.
We've given our power away.
Yeah.
We've been convinced we're something else, but we're there.
We are in the land of forgetfulness. We have forgotten our true nature. And 24/7 we're being encouraged to forget and to remain in a state of self-identity amnesia. And that's what awakening is. What is awakening? Well, I woke up. Well, no one's woke up. None of us have woken up. We are waking up. It's a process. And if you think you've got it, well, there's always more to know. Remember that, Socrates, etc. So what is awakening? It is breaking out of only processing reality through the five senses and seeing that there is more to us than just the body, and then seeing that there is more to us than just the soul if you go that far, and away you go. And what happens is that when you think limitation and you believe limitation and you self-identify with limitation, limitation is a low vibrational state because your perception of self is so limited, so your frequency is limited by your perception of limitation. And so those kind of people, they'll say things like, nothing ever happens in my life. My life's ever so boring. Every day is the same and all that. Yeah, because that's your perception becoming your experienced reality. But as you expand your self-identity, you know, honestly, I see the gurus and I see the people, the spiritual teachers and all that stuff. And they so often they make it sound so complex. Oh, you have to go on a quest and you have to do this and you have to do that and then you do this and drink the right tea. I've got no problem with people doing that if they want to do it. But it's complicating a simple process. Self-identity dictates your experience. Simple as that. You think little me, you'll have a little me life. Simple as that. And it goes in other ways too. Why? Because as you expand your self-identity, your sense of the I, and you move to a point where I am a point of attention within infinite reality, then I am infinite reality. As your self-identity expands, your sense of self, who you are, so your frequency expands. And as your frequency expands, you're moving into higher and higher levels of awareness, which that expansion of your own awareness, that's where it's taking you. And suddenly you're tapping in to levels of knowledge, awareness, intuitive knowing, insight, which isn't available on the lower frequencies. And what do they do when you tap into them and you say, hey, this is what I've discovered? They say, you're frickin' mad, you're a lunatic, you're dangerous. And all you are is tapping into levels of awareness that they're not tapping into. Not because you're special or more important than them, but you've remembered who you are. You are changing your sense of self-identity, and they are not. So they're an eddy going round and round. Nothing ever happens in my life. It's ever so boring. Every day is the same. When you go into levels of expanded awareness, no second is the frickin' same. Never mind every day. Because you are tapping into levels of insight, awareness, possibility that are only available in these expanded higher frequencies of energy consciousness. And anyone can do it. Anyone can do it. Ethel on the checkout, you can frickin' do it. Anyone can do it. But they don't want us to know we can do it. Right. They want us to think, I'm just little me, I've got no power, I have to do what authority tells me. Why? Because they know best.
Does it take effort to do it? Is it hard to do it? Do people have to push themselves to do it? Is it easy to go back to a little reality? Is it hard to go to an expanded reality?
Well, I would just say to people, just take a month and everywhere you go, everything you do it from the perspective that you are infinite awareness, all-knowingness, having an experience. Doesn't mean you don't do the things that humans do, but you do it from the perspective of this is not me. This is an experience that me is having. Do it for a month. It'll change your life. Yeah. You'll never be the same again. Yeah. If you do it and consciously do it, you'll never be the same again, because you'll realize that because of the insights you get, because of the intuitive knowings that you get, by the way you feel, you will know that the you thought you were is not who you really are. Just a month. But it's not about every now and again. It's everything you do. I am infinite awareness, looking into this world, having an experience. The experience is not me. This is me. And it will change your life.
And as soon as you try to get pulled back into that human experience, you have to resist the temptation.
Yeah.
Right? And everything's going to trigger you to try to pull you back into
that. This is the point, Brian. What happens is when you start, you get pulled back in. But the more you go, no, hold on, no, and the less you get pulled back in, and the less you get pulled back in until you are here most of the time. Everyone gets pulled back in. Yeah. You know, something happens and you get, you know, but you're here most of the time. And it's a completely different world. Why? Because you are actually looking into this reality from another reality when you get to that level of expanded awareness.
Right. And that's how we escape the trap.
That's how we escape the trap. And if people think we do it by stockpiling weapons and fighting the enemy, that's just what they want. It's just what they want. You know, it's very much on the basis of electricity. Electricity needs polarities. It needs the positive, it needs the negative. And in the cult's version, this simulation version, it needs the imposition, and it needs the resistance. Right. Then they got you in the battle. That's where they want you. Right. But if you don't resist, you just don't cooperate. You don't fight back, you just don't cooperate. Because if enough people don't cooperate, there's nothing they can do. What do they become? They become one hand clapping. Because there's no resistance making the electrical circuit which empowers them. What you fight, you become. Right. Instead of that, just don't cooperate with it. Don't fight it, just say, no, not doing it. Right. Not doing it, nope, not doing it. If enough people do that, it's over.
I love your line, don't fight, what you fight, you become. I love that line.
You see it everywhere. You see it everywhere. I remember once
the natural human tendency is to fight something that you think is trying to stop you or wrong. But that's the wrong. Again, you need to separate and not become that.
Yeah, I talked to a police officer once, a long time ago. And he used to police the marches of the National Front. Remember the National Front, the kind of Nazi far-right National Front? And then they used to have the Anti-Nazi League marching against them, right? And he said to me something to me very, very profound. He said, you know something, mate? He said, if it weren't for the banners, I wouldn't know which were which. What you fight, you become. Don't fight, just don't cooperate. And there's nothing they can do. Simple as that.
David, you're 70 years old, and it looks like you're just getting warmed up. What are you doing the next 5 years? What are you doing at least till the singularity in 7 years?
Yeah, well, I'm going to go on doing what I do, which is follow my intuition. I've got another book in my head, which I'll write at some point, maybe in the winter. I'm doing a lot of work for Iconic now. I'm just made a film, which is now in the editing process, called Albion, Heart of the World, and it looks at the energetic reason why the British Isles, which you can hardly find on the map, on the globe, has had such a massive impact on the world, and why so much of this cult is based in places like London. Yeah, I'm just going to go on following my intuition, and it's taken me where it's taken me, and it's all worked out, so why change? I'm just going to keep doing it. But what I want to do, of course, as with the trap, is keep pushing the cutting edge to go deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole, because the deeper you go, the more knowledge you have about how you can break the whole thing up.
Yeah. Well, you guys are doing some great work at Iconic, producing some great stuff coming out of there, so that's fantastic. Yeah, please keep that up. And yeah, right now is the quiet time, but I got a funny feeling we're going to need you back to do some explaining to us sooner than later, like we needed you in 2020.
Well, I think, funny enough, that this is a calm between storms. It's not a calm for people who are trying to pay the rent and all that stuff, but I mean, it's a calm between the big imposition storms, the obvious imposition storms. But it's coming, and yeah, I said to someone today, I'm not sure I'll be writing a book this winter. I think there'll be too much to react to, and I think that's where we're going. So it's all hands on deck, and let's remember the most powerful word in the English language can be no. No, no, not doing it. And that takes the power away that has created the monster that is imposing its will upon us currently. So we need to neuter the monster by ceasing to give it our power, because it's got none itself.
Yeah. You were here in January and you said, stop acquiescing, or as you say, we're not having it. And I went to a doctor's office to get like an ear test or something, like, and it was a week later, and they're like, you know, put a mask on inside the office. And I was just, are you exempt? And I was like, yeah, I am exempt. I'm exempt from doing stupid things. And that's all they needed to hear. And they were fine with it. And it was you kind of just reminding all of us that all it takes is a no.
All it takes is no. That's all it takes. And people are frightened to say no to authority. And that time has got to end now.
Yeah, let's make it end. How can people get a copy of this? And there's a rumor you've done an audio version with your voice.
Yeah.
It's the first, right?
Yeah, it is the first, yeah. You can get that at davidike.com, and the audio book should be up like any second or any day, because I've done it. I've read the book, recorded.
I was at a conference this last week at the Excel Center, and so many people came up to me to thank me and you for putting all that information out in 2020. Like, so many people. And I think back to that first conversation we had in March, and that second one we had on April 6th that was second largest live stream in the world that was subsequently banned. And everything you said there and how much of it became true.
Yeah, and this is the thing. People say, how do you predict the future? Well, answer is I don't. I say what the agenda is, and if nothing comes to intervene to stop it, it becomes the future. Right. That's what I've been doing. I've been saying this is how they want to change the world, this is the way they want to take the world, and unless we intervene, that's what's going to happen. And so it's happened. And people think you're predicting the future. You're not. You're predicting the plan. And the time is here now, late in the day, but it's here, that we stop predicting the future and we start creating a different one to what this cult wants. And we do that by not acquiescing, because we got into this mess by acquiescing.
Right, right. We just remember we are infinite energy having a brief experience called being human.
Yeah.
And that's what we have to do.
Yeah, but we're not human. We are an experience called human. We are consciousness having the experience.
Right.
And we're not a soul. That's another experience. We are the spirit beyond all of it. That is beyond even experience, because it's all knowing. It's all that is, has been, and ever can be. How can something be all that is, has been, and ever can be, when it's all possibility? All possibility. That's what we are, all possibility. Just waiting for a choice on which possibility we want to manifest. What happens in the simulation is an external force makes that choice for us. That's why we're where we are. Start making your own choices and overriding the imposed choices, and the game is done, and we're all out here.
David Ayk, thank you for being you.
Cheers, mate. 10
conversations. I'm sure we're probably going to have 10 more. Strap on your seatbelts. Thank you so much, as usual, and we'll see you here next time. All right?
Cheers, Brian.
Okay, all the best. See you all later. Bye.